I know a lot of people who they start out in business together with a partner and it's just kumbaya. They're super excited. And then 5 years later, they want to strangle each other. And what needs to be put in place in a partnership at the very beginning with somebody like you to, I don't know, ensure that there's guidelines and what happens if there's a disagreement and what happens if one of them wants to leave, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, the first thing is you have to understand that.
Welcome to the Small Business Safari, where I help guide you to avoid those traps, pitfalls, and dangers that lurk when navigating the wild world of small business ownership. I'll share those gold nuggets of information and invite guests to help accelerate your ascent to that mountaintop of success. It's a jungle out there, and I want to help you traverse through the levels of owning your own business that can get you bogged down and distract you from hitting your own personal and professional goals. So strap in, adventure team, and let's take a ride through the safari and get you to the mountaintop.
Well, it feels like it's been a month, but it's only been a week in podcast land. But Alan, we have not been together for a while, and I'm telling you, man, I didn't realize how energized I get just getting together with you and getting a chance to talk with people and kick it around talking about biz.
Well, and I mean, I know we don't like time stamping ourselves, but think of what's happened since we actually last met. We had a poop show of a debate. We had a presidential candidate get shot.
Then we had another one
drop out. We have a new presidential. I mean, how's your business surviving with all that chaos in Washington? Is it?
It's funny you should say it because I just had a big company-wide meeting this morning where literally one of my slides was presidential debate. Don't let it interfere. I said presidential election. Don't let it interfere with what we do. I was so worried that it was going to be a big distraction for us. And I'm wondering now if it's going to be such a big distraction that it won't be a distraction. Because every election year, we always slow down right before the election starts because uncertain money doesn't spend. People don't want to work on their house. They want to see if their guy gets in. And if they do, well, we go back to working on their house.
It kind of goes to show how resilient Americans are. It's like this should be really concerning, and everybody's just cruising around about their day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it couldn't get any more comical.
It's actually I actually have some friends in England through the show. And I texted him and said, I think I might be moving to England. He goes, no better here, mate. So, well, let's get in. Speaking of elections and legal stuff, we have a great guest today, Matthew Farnaro from Farnaro Law down in South Florida. Going to drop all kinds of legal nuggets on us on what we can do about our business, how we can protect ourselves, or maybe we just kick it around and talk football. I don't know. We'll see whatever happens.
I know you, Chris. You're going to try to get 45 minutes of free legal advice out of this, and I'm hoping you send him a big fat bill.
Chris and Alan, thanks for having me. It wouldn't be the first time someone tried to get free legal advice from me for 45 minutes. So.
What? Oh, we weren't the first.
He knows.
At least this is a podcast, so that's good.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, thanks for coming on. So let's start. Were you always going to be a lawyer? Was this your thing? And then did you go big corporate law and then start your own gig? And give us a little background.
Well, that's a pretty good guess, Chris. Yes, I kind of always knew I wanted to be an attorney, even when I was like a little kid. I like watching like the People's Court and like the Judge and other TV shows, not necessarily like other legal dramas or anything. So I always kind of knew I wanted to do that. I was political science major in undergrad, and then I went to law school. Coming out of law school, I worked for two large AmLaw 200 law firms and did a lot of commercial litigation and corporate stuff. And then I had the opportunity to work for an even bigger law firm. But I decided I wanted to go out on my own and focus on helping small and medium-sized businesses. That was about 9 years ago. And that's what I've been doing since.
So as you made that change, you doing the big, large corporate, I guess in the beginning too, was it the meat grinder where they had you working like hour upon hour, billing as much as you could?
Yeah, it's everything you think it is, and even worse. So it's a lot of back, and remember, this is all pre-COVID when you had to like be in person. So it's a lot of like being the first person in, being the last person out of the office to show like, you're a hard worker and stuff like that. So
that's what you still expect, right, Chris?
I do. Actually, I do. I'm going back right after this podcast to desk check everybody at 6 o'clock tonight. No, of course not.
But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that would happen, tremendous amount of billing, hard work, stuff like that.
All right,
So
so you wanted to be an attorney when you were a little kid. So were you argumentative in school? Did you talk back to your parents a lot? Did you?
I really wasn't argumentative at school. I used to try to manipulate my parents a lot, but I think I used my skills more to be like solution based than I was to be like an arguer or be manipulative. But I had a lot of toys growing up, so I made up pretty good.
Nice. So you honed that skill early on.
Yeah, I had
Let's
I
talk
went to Toys R Us all the time. I was pretty good.
let's talk about that leap into the business world as opposed to the legal. When you looked at it, did you have a bevy of clients? Did you have a business plan? How did you go about starting it?
Well, I know now how I would have liked to go about starting, but I mean, it was either now or never kind of situation where I was always either going to be, in the big grind or go do my own thing. So I kind of, I had some clients who I took with me, but I had to kind of figure out a lot of stuff on my own because I didn't really have any practical real world business training to do anything. So I kind of had to do a lot of on the job training and figuring out while I go, which I think I'm pretty good now, almost a decade later. And I kind of take all that knowledge and stuff and try to pass it on to my clients while being there, not just their attorney, but their counselor at law. But I did like two programs to like better teach me about small business, and they were pretty helpful. One was the Kaufman Institute, and the one was the Moran program through Florida State University. So they both were really good at helping me like figure out small business and how to do things. And now I'm able to help out my small business clients by kind of passing that information on and then also using skills and knowledge that I've learned over the last like 10 years or 9 years.
So if you had it to do over again, would you have just started by taking those classes and getting that knowledge before you launched?
Yeah, I would because it made things a lot easier and it made things like, like come up with like a written business plan and make sure you have everything in place before you do everything and make sure you make really sound choices and, really think about before you do stuff.
So
Because,
you didn't have a written business plan?
when I started out, no, I didn't. I mean, I do now. I've had one for years, but when I started out, I didn't have a written business plan. And
Love it.
now that's something that, I tell all my clients, you gotta have a written business plan. It's like the first thing you need to do.
Not that I had one, but do you have one? Yeah.
So as you started to build your book of business, we checked out your website. That's one way to get clients. How did you find your best way to get clients, and what was the other ways you did it? Like the top two or three?
Well, I can tell you what the bottom two or three are first.
Yeah, let's do those.
So I wasted a lot of money doing like different, I don't want to say like different like print advertising and different web stuff that didn't really work. So that didn't really work. The thing that works for me now is mostly peer-to-peer referrals and referrals from other professionals and other attorneys and other clients is probably the best way I get business right now. But obviously, the web online SEO presence is also good. That's probably the second biggest way I get business. And, I don't know, my social media stuff is probably the third biggest way I get business. But um, starting out, I mean, I went through a whole bunch of like trial and error kind of stuff to figure out what works best. And now I had to, after all these years, I know what works best for me.
Yeah, how do you develop those peer-to-peer relationships in the law world, legal world?
I started out when I went out on my own and, oh, look at that. I just got a Jim Moran Institute email while we're sitting here. So while we started out, I went to like a lot of networking events and I joined like a business networking group and that worked out okay, but it kind of really wasn't for me and I kind of outgrew it. What I do now is I have like for lack of a better term, like a business coach, but he facilitates me having one-to-one interaction and one-to-one relationships with other professionals. That's primarily what he does. And that's how I primarily meet other professionals and get to know them and then, develop a relationship and then refer business and things like that.
So when I talk to a lot of my friends in business, they think of attorneys as, it's kind of an after the fact. I have a problem and do you know an attorney? So talk to our audience a little bit about the value of, meeting with an attorney is as important as meeting with a good banker and a good accountant and that kind of thing, to just be part of your team when you launch.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alan. When I represent businesses and people, I focus on like a team concept where you're the business person. Ideally, I want you to make business decisions and leave other decisions to professionals who are part of your team. So that's why I always encourage business people when they start out to have like a banker, an accountant, like if they're into the internet or web, like a internet webmaster and an attorney, because working together as a team, they will take all those separate areas and focus on their area so that you can focus on just the business part. And ideally, you're just doing business stuff and not having to worry about, you know, tax, administrative, legal stuff and have your professionals do that. So those are all necessities as much as you think they're luxuries. I mean, they're necessities in business. So as part of when I tell my clients, my new business clients, they need to budget their time and their expense to have ideally an accountant, ideally a banker, ideally a business law attorney on their team, because it's all proactive, doing things correct to begin with, rather than being reactive and having to deal with problems after they arise.
Can you give us some examples of things that can prevent from happening by having a good relationship with an attorney who knows your business?
Yeah. So just from the absolute beginning of doing anything, I mean, before you even start your business, the attorney is going to work with you and your accountant to figure out what the best business organization for you is. Because someone may be a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC, a partnership, you don't know until you meet with an attorney for the legal part and an accountant for the money part to figure out what's the best business organization for you to even start out with. And then with that, you have your written business plan. So the attorney won't necessarily write it for you, but they'll help you set it up, and then they'll help you register the business and then go from there.
So when somebody comes to you after the fact, and that's where it usually happens, right? You said be proactive, not reactive, but
No, actually, I said that.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
Thanks
okay.
for paying attention, Chris.
So
he said it was a good point.
Did he?
Yeah, he did.
I said it was a good point. I said
Yeah,
Alan was a good point.
yeah, mark that
Oh,
down.
fine. All right. Proactive, reactive, fine. But literally 5% of the people out there are proactive, right? I got to imagine most people coming to you are like, oh, I got this happening and I need some help. What is that typical? What are the more common, oh my God, I need your help?
Sure. It's, a lot of it's stuff that could have been prevented if you came to me before you started your business. But a lot of it, some of it's out of your hands. Some of it's just stuff that happens while you're being in business. But I would say, obviously, a huge part is problems with your business partners or people you're in business with. People who owe you money or people who you owe money to, landlord tenant issues, vendor issues, things like that. Things that if you had an attorney on board to begin with, probably they wouldn't be as bad as they are, because an attorney would help you create, like if you're a corporation, would help you create bylaws and help you create articles of incorporation, or if you're an LLC, an attorney would help you create a operating agreement that you would have in place to tell you what to do if there's ever a problem, versus you just kind of formed it, went online, signed up, and now you're kind of just floating along with none of those agreements. So those are probably those 5 or 6 things I talked about were probably the main things that people come to me about.
He touched on one thing that I find that I would like to ask about, which is the partnership piece. And longtime fans of our show know that Chris doesn't play well with others. So, this is, you can just
I
get
identify as that.
that's right. But I know a lot of people who they start out in business together with a partner and it's just kumbaya. They're super excited. And then 5 years later, they want to strangle each other. What needs to be put in place in a partnership at the very beginning with somebody like you to, I don't know, ensure that there's guidelines and what happens if there's a disagreement and what happens if one of them wants to leave, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, the first thing is you have to understand that someone who you call partner isn't necessarily your partner. They're your business affiliate or your business associate. If you're the only way you're a partner is if you're both, you have a partnership, like you formed a limited partnership or an actual partnership. If you're in business with a guy or a lady and you have an LLC or you have a corporation, you're calling that person your partner, you're not really uh, their partner, you're just in business together. So it's kind of a misnomer when people use the term partner, because unless it's a true partnership, you're not really partners, you're people who are in business together. So assuming that most people who interchangeably use the term partner, most of the time they're really talking about a corporation or an LLC that they're part of. And the way you avoid problems is that, like I was just speaking about a little earlier, if you're a corporation, you have your bylaws that explain everything about your corporation. They explain how you take on members, how you get rid of members, or excuse me, shareholders and officers. They explain what they're supposed to do. They explain what they're not supposed to do. They explain how the company works. They explain how, if there's a stalemate or if there's a problem, what you do. It's the same thing with an operating agreement for an LLC. So once those documents are in place, that's kind of your roadmap to when there's any kind of issue, and particularly when there's an issue between two people or three people or whatever who are in business together, to figure out how do we fix our relationship? How do we get rid of someone? How do we bring someone in? How do we close down the business? How do we separate the business? That kind of thing.
So how often when these people come in, they think, hey, well, we got a partnership, we've got a disagreement, or usually it's one person coming to you, not both, right? Is it more often than not that they don't have a true LLC where it's a 50-50 split or there's a 75-25 documented split?
I'd say it's probably 50-50, but I will say the 50% of people who do have documents aren't great. Like there's stuff that they found off the internet or stuff that they went to like a legal Zoom and had them just do like the 99.99 special or whatever. So
Did that hurt, Chris?
they're like
No, I
a
did not do
small,
I literally just had I literally just had another lawyer say, yeah, you can go out and do your own trust. I said, so you like legal Zoom? He goes, whoa. I said, exactly.
yeah.
So not legal
So
Zoom.
yeah, I would say it's usually that kind of percentage of people, and it's a very, I don't say very small, but it's a smaller percentage of people who actually have good business documents in place.
Huh. How about that? Again, it's the stuff you don't want to think about, right? When you got this next new sexy widget, you got an idea, you want to start a handyman company, let's say, for example.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, yeah, you just go out there, you're running, you're trying to figure out how to run the business. You're not thinking, well, I got to protect myself. I got to have the right organization, the right articles of incorporation, the standard operating agreements. You just don't thinking about that stuff. So I can see where, having somebody like you get involved, but again, that's being proactive.
Well, and I think so many people are afraid of attorneys and they're afraid that it's really expensive. And I think you're one of those.
I am.
Yeah.
I mean, no offense, Matthew, but I don't like attorneys,
It's
and I think you guys are too expensive.
It's probably
But
way
don't
more
take any
expensive
offense.
when you come in with
You say that?
a big goddamn hairball as
Yeah,
opposed to just having a relationship ahead of time, don't you think?
I do. Yeah, of course, the relationship I did have here, he retired 2 years ago, so I don't. I'm actually
Probably
alone.
because of you. He's probably
Well,
operating somewhere else under an assumed name.
he did take my call,
Yeah.
but he did tell me I'm retired. So, can we go back?
Yeah,
All right.
we should.
So, what are some of the bigger issues you've seen with companies that have been in business for 4 or 5 years? They got over that hump. Because that's hard to do, even to make it to 4 or 5 years. What do you see with those companies as they're emerging and growing?
They have growing pains as far as like, are they going to scale up and be bigger, or are they going to stay where they are and kind of be stable? So it's a lot of, do I take on debt? Do I take out a loan? Do I take on quote unquote partners, which are, really just other people in business? Do I expand? That the kind of teething pains and things like that are a lot of what I see um growing established businesses face. Also, everyone faces the same kind of problems, whether it's, sometimes there's labor issues with your employees and other issues you deal with, and kind of your business culture is, not what you want it to be, and you kind of gotta either reboot it or figure out what you want to do. So those are probably the main issues of like of a going concern, that just have like non-emergency kind of issues that arise. Otherwise, like emergency issues are always like, people owe me money, I owe people money, we entered into a contract, someone breached it, that kind of thing.
Do you have what it takes to start your own business? Are you tired of the 9 to 5 corporate job and ready to make that leap into entrepreneurship? You need to check out From the Zoo to the Wild, the book by successful entrepreneur Chris Lalomia. This book is a unique perspective on the journey into the wild world of home services and delivering excellence in service while working in customers' homes. Lalomia shares his path to success in this industry, including proven customer relationship strategies, award-winning customer experience processes, and a unique approach to training a team of service technicians to perform at the highest levels. Whether you're a small business trying to scale or a franchise operation, From the Zoo to the Wild will give you the mindset, habits, leadership style, and customer-oriented processes to succeed as a small business owner in the world of home services. So if you're ready to take control of your future, get a copy of From the Zoo to the Wild today, available on Amazon.
If you were giving advice for people out there looking for a lawyer or a business lawyer to be a partner with, what do you think some of those questions, what should they be prepared to be asking you to get the right partner on board with them?
Well, one of the things I would say is you want to find out what their experience is actually working with similar sized or similar um area businesses. So if you have like an ice cream shop, let's just say, and you're looking for a business law attorney, and there's a guy who's the ice cream shop guru, and then there's someone who's not, you're probably going to want to go with the ice cream shop guru over someone who's not to be your attorney. It's the same thing with any other area. You want to find someone who ideally represents other people in your space, not necessarily your competitors, but other similar kind of businesses and have had similar experiences in the past, so they know what your business is about and they kind of know what your industry is about, if possible. If not, you want a business law attorney who understands business, not just, someone who just grinds along and perfunctory does things and generates documents or whatever. They actually understand what it means to like make payroll and have to take out your deductions and pay taxes and all things like that.
That's a great point because you brought up the corporate law and then you said, "Hey, I didn't have the experience," and I've heard that a lot about lawyers and doctors specifically. Very good at what they do, not very good business operators, and that's why some of these have become ripe for consolidations and acquisitions. And so I find that interesting. So know somebody who's in your industry, find them, seek them out, and then do that. So how do you know that they know what they're doing? I guess you get referrals, you talk to some other people.
Yeah, I mean, look, as much as you want to believe or not believe what's on the internet, I mean, you can always look at Google reviews and look at legitimate Google reviews, not like bots or something like that, and see what people's ratings are, and then go by word of mouth. Like you can ask, if you're in business, I'm assuming you probably know other people who are your competitors or your colleagues in your business. Ask them, like, who's your attorney? Who do you think's a good attorney? Who have you used? Because most of the time, unless you're in like some cutthroat business where you're, like Hatfield and McCoying it up there or whatever, I mean, most business people will be nice and cordial to other business people, particularly when they're like seeking business advice. So ask other people what they think, like who's a good accountant that you use, or who do you know who knows a good accountant, or who do you know who is a good attorney, or who do you know who knows a good attorney. And most of the time you'll find someone, and generally referrals are better than just finding someone yourself because they've already been vetted by someone who you already trust. So they've already kind of passed that first hurdle. So then you kind of know what you're getting once you hire that person.
No, I think that's an excellent point. And obviously there's a lot of specialties. And one of the things I just attended was an exit forum where we had a M&A lawyer focused on business exits, and that's his specialty. In your case, would you be the lawyer who takes that company from beginning to getting ready to exit, or do you help people exit?
I've helped people exit, but that's something that I would bring in con a a attorney who focuses on that area because I want it done well. Like I can do it, but that's not like my particular like focus. And if we're gonna sell your business or we're gonna do whatever, it's gonna be a big transaction, no matter how much money, and it's a whole shift of things. So that's when I would want to bring in like a transactional attorney to help me with that because I can do it, but I'm not gonna be great at it. I want someone who's gonna be great at it to do it for my client.
That's solid. I love that idea too. So, like in HR law, you go out and find somebody who's maybe specialized in HR if something like that happened as well.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
HR. I mean, I have an HR person who I'll refer all those issues to because,
yeah.
yeah, I know HR stuff, but I'd rather you go to someone who's like board certified in that or someone whose full focus is just doing HR stuff all day long because they're gonna, be focused on that and know things that other people don't or other attorneys don't know.
Yeah, I love that he knows how to bring in the specialist because again, a lot of us don't know that. And actually,
Or
when
that
I
he's
went to that,
willing to do it.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
that's obviously a great guy to have in your camp as well. Because when I listened to this forum and he said I specialize in M&A, I mean it hit me. I was like, oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There's just a lot that goes into that, especially in a transaction of any size. So as you're operating, you're working with companies that are operating. How often do you talk with them? Do you proactively touch them? Do you wait for them to touch you after you guys have a relationship? How does that work?
I mean, I proactively touch them because like I have like I send out all my um like all my newsletters and all stuff like that, just to make sure I stay top of mind of them in case they ever need to come reach me and they're like, oh, I should call Matt or I should, you always reach out to me. I don't care. Give me a call, give me an email, whatever. So I try to stay proactively in on the top of my clients' minds or, top of other people's minds because I like to, kind of brainstorm with them to avoid future problems before they get to that point. But then, a lot of the time people call me after there's an issue or when there's something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I got to believe in my mind, attorneys have always been reactive, except obviously I have a good friend, Troy, who is a lawyer, and so I use him, and he's got a good business head on him and his shoulders as well. So he's been my proactive lawyer, but he's in North Carolina, and that's my question for you, Matthew. Do you work with people just in South Florida? Can you work with people virtually outside of Florida? How's your mix look?
Yeah, I mean, I have clients all over the country and I have like some international clients too. Obviously the focus of what I do is in Florida. Most of my clients are in Florida just because geographically and whatever, that's how everything happens. But, you know, for the most part, there's 50 states, there's 50 different corporate regulations, there's different sets of either state tax or no state tax or corporate tax or no corporate tax. So I generally work with outside businesses outside the state of Florida, but I always work with a attorney who's, localized to where they are. If I'm gonna help someone like, in North Carolina, I'm always gonna seek out like, okay, well, I can help you do this and this, and we're gonna bring in a North Carolina attorney to make sure that everything's done correctly. And that's kind of how, just like I was talking about bringing a specialist or bringing someone who's focused on something, Same thing, not just subject matter, but geographic focus, bring in someone for a geographic focus.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, that makes a ton of sense,
Can
really.
you do a pros and cons on somebody selecting an attorney and you go for you're looking at the big firm because maybe they've got more experts that can do more things versus more of a boutique type firm?
I mean, you can find great and terrible attorneys at both. I mean, I'll leave it as bluntly as that. I mean, just because someone's at a big firm or just because it's a big firm doesn't mean that, they're going to do a better job than someone who's at like a small firm or a boutique. And just because someone's at a small firm or a boutique, it doesn't mean they're going to be more focused than someone who works at a big firm. It's more, it's certainly subjective. I would look more for the attorney than the law firm as far as what you're looking for, like what we talked about before, as far as referrals and things like that. Because there's some great attorneys who are at big firms, there's some great attorneys who are at small firms.
No, that's good advice. I mean, obviously, you want to work with people you like, people you can trust. It's just finding them. I mean, again, I was just thinking about that. I'm here in NARI, which is the National Association of the Remodeling Industry here in Atlanta, and I'm also on the national board. I was in both of those meetings the last 2 weeks, and I was just thinking about that. I'm like, why isn't a lawyer in our group? And why isn't a lawyer talking to all these other remodelers and contractors about the things that we need to be thinking about?
Hmm.
I think we're ripe for it. I know we're ripe for it. How about that? Tongue in cheek. So, who do you mostly work with? Who's your biggest industries?
It's funny you should mention the construction-ish industry because a lot of what I do is construction related stuff. I represent a lot of general contractors, subcontractors, material men, things like that, just because particularly where I am in South Florida, that's just a hot issue of people. There's a lot of construction. There's a lot of people who don't like construction or people who are in construction. So there's a lot of issues, and that's always hot down here. So I would say probably my biggest hot button industry would be construction industry. But then, I represent all kinds of different businesses from across the gamut. I mean, I represent, like a couple apps, like people who own apps that are on like the Apple Store, and like doctors, dentists, just all kinds of, air conditioning companies, just all kinds of different things.
Let's go into that app thing because all of us think that that's where we're going to all make our $1 million.
I have no delusions of that.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Some of us who are younger than you.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about what you should be protecting from an IP perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the technology stuff is a tough racket because it's very thought intensive and very capital intensive. But if you're not just for technology, but for anything, you want to protect your intellectual property because that's, I mean, that's equity and that's income at some point it's going to be. So if you're into like tech stuff and you're inventing stuff, whatever, obviously you want to patent stuff that you invent. If you're coming up with designs and stuff, you want to copyright or trademark them. So another thing you want to put in your, I don't want to say budget, but in your forecast of how you do your business is that if you're into something where you're creating intellectual property, you want to make sure you protect that intellectual property.
So that's obviously something we want to ask you about because, for example, the Trusted Toolbox, I have it trademarked or copyrighted, one of the two. I have it marked somehow. I don't know, but I keep it up with it. I've been keeping up with it. So that's the thing. I think a lot of us aren't really sure what is intellectual property and, hey, I got a great idea. Shouldn't I protect that before I do anything with it? I've heard somebody's completely on one side, I don't want to tell anybody about it until I get an attorney involved. And I have other people who say, yeah, I'll tell you everything. And then, so is that something you could advise somebody as they're trying to figure something out? Is this going to be something I should patent? Should I trademark it? Should I just keep going with it and then come back to you later? Is that the kind of advice you would help them with?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things where, again, I bring in the IP specialists to help out. But if someone tells me that they're inventing something, obviously, attorney-client privilege, you can tell me all about it without risking giving away your secrets or whatever. But then if it's something that you're serious about, we're going to have to go try to patent it or try to do something with it. Same thing with, like Trusted Toolbox, something you ever trademarked. same thing. You come up with the design or come up with a logo or a name. You got to go protect it. So you got to trademark it, or you write a book or something, you want to copyright it. So you got to protect it. But that's another thing where, yes, I can do it and I do it, but I bring in my specialists to help out and that kind of, particularly with patents, because patent is totally different subject, totally different animal. You need a patent attorney or a patent agent. Nobody can just go willy-nilly and get a patent. You have to have very
Yeah.
special people.
Yeah. There's a lot involved in that. I know that's a big deal.
Super complicated.
Yeah. What is the coolest business you've ever worked with? I mean, when you think back, man, coolest people, what's the coolest business?
Um, I mean, I don't want to play favorites, but there's some businesses that are a lot cooler than other businesses as far as like, wow, that's a pretty cool business. I would say probably back in the day, I would say this one business that I represented that this was in 2004. They kind of cornered the market on every website possible regarding the law. So we trademarked like 50 different names for like just the most basic stuff you can, like, I can't believe this stuff wasn't taken by that point, like personalinjury.com and stuff like that. So it was interesting because, to see all the people who then came and like, were like, I'll pay you this amount of money for that website or whatever, like years later, and they still have my name like on those trademark applications was pretty cool. But then there's other businesses that are, like I like, some like I like the people as opposed to just the business. I mean, there's like I represent the largest large format graphics printer in the country. So this guy prints all the stuff that you see at Disney and Universal, like every single sign he makes at a warehouse in Fort Lauderdale. And then all the different things you see on cruise ships and at the port, he does all that in his warehouse. And so he's got stuff in that warehouse that the general public won't see for like a year, particularly like the Star Wars stuff. Like he's got stuff like the secret Disney stuff that's not going to come out for a long period of time. And that's like in his warehouse, like right now. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
pretty cool.
cool.
I like going over there to visit him because I see stuff. And then when my kids were younger, I used to get like incredible Star Wars posters and stuff that I would bring home.
Nice. Dad's a hero.
Yeah, exactly.
Dad being what's dad do? He's an attorney. What's he really do? I don't know. But he brings me cool Star Wars stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Matthew, we're coming to the end of this. This has been dynamite dialogue and great information. How can people find you? Let's get those information out there. I know you got a great website.
Sure. The best way to reach me is my website, which is FarnaroLegal.com. That'll take you to all my online presence media because I have Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that stuff. And then I have a whole thing of videos and white papers and like blogs where many of your questions will be answered merely by going to my website.
There you go. Free legal advice on Fornaro
That's
Legal.
what you were looking for this whole time.
I was all over that website before we got on this thing, man. Well, before my CRM call.
Go to the media and discussion portion, and all your free legal advice is there.
All right, and I'm gonna start following them on the gram, baby. So that's awesome stuff. But we can't let you go without asking our famous 4 questions. First is, what is a book you would recommend to our audience, either looking to start a business or trying to scale a business?
I would recommend reading 7 Steps of Highly Effective People.
7 Habits. Love it.
Classic.
I'm through 3.5 of them. No,
just because it's always good. I mean, look, there's like so many books that are good to just read and stuff. I mean, that's just a good book to read.
It is.
Read not just once, but every once in a while to brush up on it.
That's actually a really good point.
That's when you can go back.
You just couldn't get past being nice to people, though, right, Chris? Is that
when they? I skipped that section. Next chapter. What? Nice? No. The book I just finished was Grit by Angela Duckworth, that one of our other podcast guests. And I would have to say that was a pretty good book, man. It was a
Yeah.
good stuff in there. She did a lot of research and dialogue in there, but Grit, that was good for me. But okay, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, love it. What's the favorite feature of your home?
Favorite feature of my home would be the Wi-Fi.
I thought he was going to say the view of the intercoastal.
No, I wish I was on the intercoastal. I'm on a lake though, but I
Yeah.
would say the Wi-Fi because that connects me to the internet, which I'm addicted to, and to my television, which I'm addicted to. So,
So last night we had a huge storm in Atlanta and my internet was out for 3 hours.
What on earth did you do?
Oh my gosh. I said, well, I should read a book. My son was home, and he goes, oh, I guess it's a good time to read a book. I'm like, yep. And then I figured out I could find a way to get my iPad online through my cell. And so I went back to watching Receivers on Netflix.
Truly addicted. Do you have gators in your lake?
yeah, there's a bunch of lakes that are like interconnected underground. So technically it's all one giant like ecosystem and there's like a nature preserve near me. So there's a bunch of gators over there. So sometimes they come over to my small lake, but if I want, I mean, I can walk out and see a gator. It's no big deal.
Wow. No swimming with them though.
It's kind of a deal.
Yeah, they're if you don't mess with them, they leave you alone.
All right. I'll let you test that theory.
Yeah.
All right. One of the things that we are prideful of here is that we are customer service
Freaks.
Thank you. What is a customer service pet peeve of yours when you're out there and you're the customer?
When I'm the customer, crappy phone reception. Like
That,
when
you
you
know, that
call
is a good one.
in, when you call in and you get routed around to different press one for English.
Oh, you hate the
And
decision
then
tree.
Oh,
yeah, the decision tree because like I just want a person to speak to who I can easily get my answer from, but you're hiding that person from me via having to press like 50 buttons. So that always irks me.
speaking of which, did I mention my internet was out? My provider is now a verb for me, and that's why I've been Comcasted. And I've tried to cancel Comcast, right? Well, I get the callback number. Instead of waiting, I said, give me the callback number. Well, I had blocked their number years ago. So I did this for 3 days in a row. And I'm like, these bastards won't even call me back. And I went back and looked at my blocked calls and they were all there. So now I'm open to back up. And
So much for Comcast being a sponsor of the podcast.
I don't think Comcast can be a sponsor of the
No,
podcast.
I have Comcast. They're decent. I used to have AT&T till they decided to change their business model in my area and not support the platform that I was on. So I just switched to Comcast.
Yeah. I may stay with them on the internet, but I'm ditching the cable. That's the big thing because they got rid of the Braves games, and that's
Oh God, don't get me started on that.
Oh, I know. I almost did. All right. I don't know if you've worked on your house much, but one of the things we love to hear are DIY nightmares that you've done in your own home. So, give us a DIY nightmare story.
Uh, well, it would involve IKEA. So my
That's a new
wife,
one.
my wife, I don't really do a lot of DIY stuff, even though like I was really good at shop in middle school. Like I won the award for being like the best shop student. So I used to be like really good at woodwork. Like I could do the scroll saw, the bandsaw, I'd do all that stuff, but I don't do it as an adult. So my wife got a multi-part slatted mirror system from IKEA where it's like five different rectangles that you artistically put next to each other to form a giant mirror, but there's gaps in between, so it's like artsy. So I couldn't get the gaps equal for like the whole time because I would hang like the five up, I'd measure them to be like 3 inches apart, and then I'd be like, I'm done. And then my wife would look at it and be like, it looks terrible. And then I'd like measure it and it'd be like, well, it's only 2 inches here, 4 inches here, 3 inches. So it took me like an entire afternoon to get it right. And I had to nail all holes in my wall. And luckily it's all covered by the mirror, but that was not a fun experience because
That
like,
is maddening.
artistically, I just couldn't get it.
I know that is so maddening when you're hanging a mirror and it's like, no, it's an inch off. Okay, move it over. But my biggest one is we did a mirror that was 4 feet by 10. It came out of a Houston's restaurant, We mounted it over a mantle in this customer's house. It was a customer's job. And I made this. This is back before they made these metal cleats that they have today, which I should have patented. But I made my own wooden cleat, and I did it. I did all the work with one of my guys. We hung it, and she says, it's like a half inch too low. And I was sitting there when she said it. I'm sitting on the scaffolding because we had just got done setting it all. And thank God the husband came in and rescued me.
Oh my God.
It said, "Hey, honey, I think that's okay. I think we can let it."
I think you rescued her because you were going to kill her.
I was coming off the scaffolding. I'm thinking, you just think right
That's
now,
a different kind of attorney need right there.
Jimmy Superflies, look, I'm coming down, man.
I got to bring in another specialist to refer you to.
Actually, if you worked with me, you'd have to probably bring in a lot of specialists. That's for sure, because I need a lot of help. Matthew, this has been awesome. Guys, if you guys didn't learn something today, that's on you. Enjoy your time in the truck. If you stay with us to the end, thank you so much. Go out there, tell your friends, go out there, listen. You can get a lot of good information. And next time, we will be talking with Mr. Wall Control. So stay tuned. Go listen to us again. We're out of here.
Cheers.